Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm Abhi Janamanchi. My pronouns are he, him, serving you as your senior minister. If you're new with us this morning, please let us know in the live chat. Whether you're joining us today for the first time or you've been with us for a lifetime, this is your spiritual home. Whoever you are and whomever you love, this is your spiritual home. Wherever you're joining us from and however you arrived at our worship time together, this is your spiritual home. Whatever your beliefs or immigration status and however you identify, this is your spiritual home. This is a spiritual home filled with courageous love that can heal our broken nation. Thank you for taking a chance and taking the time to worship with us today. We invite you to fill out the newcomer form included in the chat. And if you've been attending for a while and are interested in becoming a member of this, our spiritual home, please reach out to Nicole Causey, our membership coordinator. Our pastoral visitors are an extension of the ministry team. They are available today in the chat to support you. Today is the Sunday before the presidential election, and it is a long-standing tradition in our faith for the minister to preach on voting, democracy, the social contract, and the state of our union. For Unitarian Universalists, democracy is more than just a political system, and voting is more than an exercise in being good citizens. It is a theological principle, a spiritual practice that connects our deepest convictions with our actions in the world. So, to that end, I am delighted and honored to welcome to our online pulpit this morning longtime social justice activist, defender of civil rights and civil liberties, especially the First Amendment, my friend and esteemed colleague, the Reverend Barry Lynn. An ordained minister in the United Church of Christ and a civil rights attorney, Reverend Lynn retired in 2017 after 25 years as executive director of Americans United for the Separation of Church and State. Reverend Lynn is an author and speaker across the country, preaching, appearing on possibly every television show in the country, including Bill O'Reilly, who once called him, "You are paranoid crazy," and hosting a radio show for many years. Reverend Lynn is the recipient of many awards, including the Freedom of Worship Award from the Roosevelt Institute and a Freedom of Speech Award from the Hugh Hefner Foundation. Welcome, Reverend Lynn. Now I have a couple of announcements. Starting today, Cedar Lane is hosting a Naming the Lost memorial to remember those dear to us who have died from the coronavirus. This outdoor garland memorial is a tangible way to honor their memory and grieve together. We're deeply grateful to Jean Burgee and Isabel Morrow for creating this beautiful memorial. To add a name, please send a note and photo to namingthelost@cedarlane.org. And please do stop by the church to see the memorial and or add a name. As one of the most consequential elections in recent history draws closer, Cedar Lane is working with our Potomac partners and other UU leaders to care for our community and our congregation next week. On Tuesday, November 3rd, Dana Edwards will lead a meditation on Zoom at noon. And on Wednesday, November 4th, there will be a post-election vigil with our Potomac partners at noon. And later in the evening at 6 o'clock, my friend Fred Johnson and I will be hosting Quiet Callings, a Vespers experience. On Thursday, November 5th, UU The Vote's nationwide vigil will be held on Facebook Live from 8 to 9 p.m. Please check your e-news for registration information.
Here is where you can lay it down. Lay down all that you've carried, the weight of the world that has rounded your back, leaving you aching and exhausted. Here is where the healing begins, where burdens are set down and alongside one another's, their magnitude does not seem as great. Here is where you can rest, where nothing is expected, but that you bring all of who you are into the presence of the holy and of this loving community. Come, let us worship together.
Good morning. I am Babs, and I am the worship associate for today's service. My pronouns are they, them. I am lighting my chalice in Bethesda. As I read the chalice lighting words, I invite you in the chat to share where you are lighting your chalice at. We kindle our chalice as a sign, a symbol of ancient fires, burning away the past to illuminate the future. May its light serve as a beacon of love for all those who mourn, and as a guide for the presence and legacy of all those we remember.
The Fall of Freddie the Leaf by Leo Buscaglia. A story for all ages. Spring had passed, so had summer. Freddie the Leaf had grown large, his midsection was wide and strong, and his 5 extensions were firm and pointed. He had first appeared in spring as a small sprout on a rather large branch near the top of a tall tree. Freddie was surrounded by hundreds of other leaves just like himself, or so it seemed. Soon he discovered that no 2 leaves were alike, even though they were on the same tree. It was Daniel who was Freddie's best friend. He was the largest leaf on the limb and seemed to have been there before anyone else. It appeared to Freddie that Daniel was also the wisest among them. It was Daniel who told them that they were a part of a tree. It was Daniel who explained that they were growing in a public park, and it was Daniel who told them that the tree had strong roots which were hidden in the ground below. Freddie loved being a leaf. He loved his branch, his light leafy friends, his place high in the sky, the wind that jostled him about, the sun rays that warmed him, and the moon that covered him with soft white shadows. Summer had been especially nice. There were many people in the park that summer, and they often came and sat under Freddie's tree. Daniel told him that giving shade was part of his purpose. "What's a purpose?" Freddie had asked. "A reason for being," Daniel had answered. "To make things more pleasant for others is a reason for being. To make shade for old people who come to escape the heat of their homes is a reason for being. To provide a cool place for children to come and play. To fan with our leaves the picnickers who come to eat on checkered tablecloths. These are all reasons for being." But Freddie's summer soon passed. It vanished on an October night. He had never felt so cold. All the leaves shivered with cold. They were coated with a thin layer of white, which quickly melted and left them dew-drenched and sparkling in the morning sun. Again, it was Daniel who explained that they had experienced their first frost, the sign that it was fall and that winter would come soon. Almost at once, the whole tree, in fact the whole park, was transformed into a blaze of color. There was hardly a green leaf left. How beautiful they all looked. Freddie and his friends had made their tree a rainbow. Why did we turn different colors, Freddie asked, when we're all on the same tree? Each of us is different. We have had different experiences. We have faced the sun differently. We have cast shade differently. Why should we not have different colors? Daniel said matter-of-factly. Daniel told Freddie that this wonderful season was called fall. One day, a very strange thing happened. That the same breezes that in the past had made them dance began to push and pull at their stems almost as if they were angry. This caused some of the leaves to be torn from their branches and swept up in the wind, tossed about and dropped softly to the ground. All the leaves became frightened. "What's happening?" they asked each other in whispers. "It's what happens in the fall," Daniel told them. "It's the time for the leaves to change their home. Some people call it to die." "Will we all die?" Freddie asked. "Yes," Daniel answered. "Everything dies, no matter how big or small, how weak or strong. We first do our job. We experience the sun and the moon, the wind and the rain. We learn to dance and to laugh, and then we die." "I won't die," said Freddie with determination. "Will you, Daniel?" "Yes," answered Daniel, "when it is my time." "When is that?" asked Freddie. "No one knows for sure," Daniel responded. "I'm afraid to die," Freddie told Daniel. "I don't know what's down there." "We all fear what we don't know, Freddie. It's natural," Daniel reassured him. "Yet you were not afraid when spring became summer, and you were not afraid when summer became fall. They were natural changes. Why should you be afraid of the season of death?" "Does the tree die too?" Freddie asked. "Someday, but there is something stronger than the tree. It is life. That lasts forever, and we're all a part of life." "Where will we go when we die?" "No one knows for sure. That's the great mystery." "Will we return in the spring?" "We may not, but life will." "Then what has been the reason for all this?" Freddie continued to question. "Why were we here at all if only to fall and die?" Daniel answered in his matter-of-fact way. "It's been about the sun and the moon. It's been about happy times together. It's been about shade and the old people and the children. It's been about colors in the fall. It's been about seasons. Isn't that enough?" That afternoon, in the golden light of dusk, Daniel let go. He fell effortlessly. He seemed to smile peacefully as he fell. "Goodbye for now, Freddie," he said. Then Freddie was alone, the only leaf left on his branch. At dawn, the wind came and took Freddie from his branch. It didn't hurt at all. He felt himself float quietly, gently, softly downwards. As he fell, he saw the whole tree for the first time. How strong and firm it was! He was sure that it would live for a long time, and he knew that he had been a part of its life, and that made him proud. Freddie landed on a clump of snow. It somehow felt soft and even warm. In this new position, he was more comfortable than he had ever been. He closed his eyes and fell asleep. He did not know that spring would follow winter and that the snow would melt into water. He did not know that what appeared to be his useless dried self would join with the water and serve to make the tree stronger. And most of all, he did not know that there, asleep in the tree and the ground, were already plans for new leaves in the spring. The end. The fall of
warm summer sun, shine kindly here. Warm southern wind blows softly here. Green sun
Thank you, choir. Thank you so much for that beautiful healing song. Each year on All Souls Day, it is our practice at Cedar Lane to remember the lives of those we've lost. Some of our loved ones that passed this year have died of cancer, some of heart failure, stroke, or something else. And many have been lost to COVID-19. The virus was an ever-present grief this year, with numbers climbing every day. Numbers that included our loved ones and community members. With these losses ever present, along with the losses of those we love with illnesses unrelated to COVID, it seemed appropriate as we remember all whom we've lost to recognize the many lives lost locally and globally to this pandemic. The first slide of this visual remembrance we'll be sharing in a moment lifts up the names of Cedar Lane members who've been lost to coronavirus. Their individual photos will be woven in with images of those we've lost this year to many other causes. Jean Burgee and Isabel Mora have installed the Naming the Lost Memorial at Cedar Lane, and you'll see all of the names of our members and loved ones who've been lost to coronavirus on that memorial when you visit it, including Chris Snare and Odile Deagle, as well as some names not in this visual memorial we're sharing in this service today. The Naming the Lost Memorial at Cedar Lane will remain at Cedar Lane for several months. Now I invite you to breathe with me into this space of mourning and memory as we remember our loved ones and the many loved ones of those whom we will never meet but were lost to the world. For me, I remember the lost by declaring presente, which is Spanish for present. But the meaning is so much deeper than that. It's a declaration of knowing that our loved ones are with us in the beating of our hearts, in our bones, in our DNA, in the air that we breathe, in the turn of phrases, the song we hear that we once sang with them. I invite you to honor each of our lost loved ones in a way that speaks to your soul, in the language of your heart, in your first language, or maybe you will say, "We remember you."
At the dawning of the day and the setting of the sun, we remember you. As we break bread at the table after all our work is done, we remember you. When a sister is hurting, needs a helping hand, when a brother needs a caring friend to understand, when the going gets rough and we're trying to see things through, we remember you. We remember you. We remember. When the crocus is in bloom and we have joys to share, we remember you. When the darkness strikes so hard, it's more than we can bear, we remember you. As we wake up with the sunrise, greet the brand new day, may we ever keep in mind your quiet wisdom and the way you humbly walk the talk, staying faithful and true. We remember you. Your dying leaves a gaping hole deep within our aching soul. Some days I wander around without a clue. I don't claim to understand, I don't see it as God's plan, how lightning sometimes strikes out of the blue. Foggy haze and the crashing storms of night, we remember you. Sowing seeds in springtime when the sky is glistening bright, we remember you. May the grandeur of the star fields always take my breath away. Like you on the potter's wheel, may I let myself be clay. Being born and dying from the old into the new. We remember you. Still trusting in the one who is making all things new. We remember you. We remember you. We remember you. We remember you. We remember. We remember you.
Presente. Queridísima Diosa, amados antepasados, escuchad nuestros gritos mientras lloramos a los que han muerto este año. Que estén siempre presentes en nuestro corazón, que podamos llevar sus recuerdos con gentileza y honestidad, y que los honoremos con nuestros hechos. Y que su coraje y fuerza se sumen a los nuestros a medida que avanzamos en este momento de pandemia y esta desafiante temporada electoral. Dearest Goddess, beloved ancestors, hear our cries as we mourn those who've died this year. May they always be present in our hearts. May we carry their memories gently and honestly, and may we honor them with our deeds. And may their courage and strength add to our own as we move through this time of pandemic and this challenging election season. May it be so. Amen. And blessed be. Let us now hold silence together as we continue to remember those we have lost and consider how we will honor them with our choices.
mercy. 'Twas grace and mercy. 'Twas grace and mercy brought me through.
Thank you, Amanda Thomas, for that beautiful, soulful song, Grace That Brought Us Through. I voted on Monday. Unwilling to rely on the mail, Lalita, Yashasvi, and I went to the county executive building here in Rockville on the first day of in-person voting, and after a 2.5-hour wait, cast our ballots. It was certainly worth the wait. While standing in line on that cold and overcast day, it was really inspiring to see the extraordinary numbers who were turning out, mirroring news reports across the country about people waiting for over 10 hours at polling places to cast their votes. All across the US, millions of voters have turned out in overwhelming numbers to vote early, whether by mail or in person. To date, more than 91.6 million Americans have cast their ballots, surpassing 2/3 of all ballots cast during the 2016 election, with 2 days to go. People have been standing in lines for hours to vote, even as the country suffered its worst week for new infections of the entire pandemic, with more than 500,000 reported cases and a single-day record of almost 100,000 cases on Friday. As one voter in Philadelphia said, "I'm going to vote like my life depends on it," because it does. Literally. And thousands of Unitarian Universalists, including many Cedar Laners, have been working hard over the past few months to get out the vote, writing postcards, making calls, serving as election judges and poll monitors. To quote historian Heather Cox Richardson, people are waking up to the fact that democracy is not a spectator sport. And people are speaking up for something more important than partisan belief, affirming their inherent worth and dignity that gives them the right to be heard. You see, each ballot is an extension of the right to be heard, which is the moral foundation of democracy. To me, the most important reason for voting has to do with our past and our future. In the earliest days of the Republic, the franchise was a privilege accorded only to propertied white men. And it took many, many decades of struggle, some of it violent and bloody, for voting rights to be extended to women, Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color. Given this history, voting is a moral obligation, a way to honor the sacrifices of the people who came before us. It is also a way to honor those who will come after us. Casting a vote with the future in mind is a way to take responsibility for the kind of planet we will leave for our children and our children's children. Now, those of us who have the right to vote also have a huge responsibility towards those who don't, including children and young adults, documented or undocumented immigrants, incarcerated or formerly incarcerated people, and citizens who cannot access the ballot for various reasons. Voting is our duty in the social contract, a way to steer the Republic in a direction that accurately reflects the will of all its citizens. So we must protect the vote and count the vote, no matter how long it takes or who tries to get in the way. So, as we approach Election Day itself, what reflection do we need? What do our spirits need to help us not only survive this election season, but stay centered through it and what will follow, with our eyes on the prize and some reasonable hope of moving forward? What do we need? Well, everyone agrees that there is a lot on the ballot this year, not just the candidates. The coronavirus pandemic is on the ballot. Systemic racism and white supremacy are on the ballot. Healthcare is on the ballot. The climate emergency is on the ballot. Sexism and misogyny are on the ballot. Reproductive rights are on the ballot. GLBTQIA rights are on the ballot. Rising economic inequality, poverty, and unemployment are on the ballot. Gun violence is on the ballot. Militarism and wars and foreign interventions are on the ballot. Immigration reform is on the ballot. Big money and vested corporate interests are on the ballot. The role of government is on the ballot. Truth itself is on the ballot. And what little democracy we have is on the ballot. And if all of this is not enough, what is certainly at stake is our path forward. Which path will we follow? Will we commit to moving forward toward being the pluralistic, multiracial, multi-generational democracy that the dream of America represents, a dream of freedom with responsibility, of acceptance and respect for diversity, of justice, equity, and peace, of possibility and hope for all, that this dream calls us to be, a dream that has never been realized by the majority of her people? Or will we stand by while that dream continues to fade? It is a stark choice. But this Tuesday is not about one election, one candidate. This election is not about going back 4 years when things were quote unquote normal. You see, because 4 years ago, Black people were still being murdered by the police. Millions of people, especially Black and brown people, were being incarcerated. 4 years ago, the top 1% owned 38.5% of the country's wealth, while 140 million Americans were poor or low wealth. 4 years ago, the median wealth of white households was 10 times the median wealth of Black households, higher than in 2007. 4 years ago, millions of working families still survived on food stamps and were uninsured. 4 years ago, immigrants were still being detained or being turned away at our borders. 4 years ago, we were nowhere near carbon neutral. 4 years ago, the US was still undemocratic with widespread voter suppression, gerrymandering, and the white supremacist appendage of the past, the Electoral College determining the outcome of elections instead of the popular vote. So 4 years ago is not good enough. We need to keep our eyes on a bigger prize. What will we need? What do we need now to sustain a broader, more embracing dream? A dream of exercising our civic discipleship, revitalizing our democracy, advancing the common good, and building the beloved community with justice, equity, and liberty for all. And we can work to make this dream a reality, but we cannot do it if we don't make our voices heard and counted at the polls. As Audre Lorde said, to refuse to participate in the shaping of our future is to give it up. Do not be misled into passivity either by false security, they don't mean me, or by despair, there's nothing we can do. Each of us must find our work and do it. Friends, we need to be ready for the likelihood that decisive results will not be announced election night. Some are predicting that we may not know well into the week. There is even talk about not knowing the outcome well into December. Now, like everyone, I would love to go to bed on Tuesday night knowing the outcome. But ensuring that every person's vote gets counted is more important. And if necessary, we will use our voice and our feet and our place to reject any attempt to silence the people's right to be heard with bold and sustained moral resistance. Still, I am hopeful because I choose to see the early turnout and voter engagement much like the mustard seed, a moment filled with immense possibility for positive change. The day after the 2016 election, civil rights lawyer and Sikh activist Valerie Kaur asked this at a night watch service, and I quote, "What if this darkness is not the darkness of the tomb, but the darkness of the womb? What if our America is not dead, but a country still waiting to be born? What if this is our great contraction before we birth a new future?" Tapping into that life-giving wisdom of mothers and midwives, Valerie also asked us that night to remember the advice during birth pangs. Breathe, then push. Breathe, push. So may we breathe and may we push through the darkness of the womb and bear witness to the great contraction that can lead to the great turning. May we be the midwives and mothers of a nation that does not exist yet, but we must give birth to. Let us breathe, let us push, and let us keep faith that in this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. May it be so. Amen.
Thank you, Abhi, for that thought-provoking homily. Each week at Cedar Lane, we have an opportunity to practice generosity through giving. We build this community together, this community that holds us so closely and weaves us together day after day, year after year, and makes love work in our community and around the world. There are many ways to give at Cedar Lane. You can give by the electronic means of our modern times, text, online giving, PayPal, QR code, or by mailing a check to the church. Today, we share the plate with UU the Vote. UU the Vote is a nonpartisan program of the Unitarian Universalist Association that provides the infrastructure for us to live into our fifth principle, the use of the democratic process. Many Cedar Laners have participated in UU the Vote through letter writing and phone banking. And now we have an opportunity to engage in the democratic process by giving to an organization that asks us to vote our UU values. Vote for love, vote for justice that truly means justice for all, and vote for hope. Our offering to sustain the mission and ministry of Cedar Lane and the work of UU the Vote will now be given and gratefully received. Thank you for your generosity.
We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these vibes. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love.
Thank you, Abhi, for inviting me to participate today. In 2016, I was honored to be asked to do the invocation at the annual dinner of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, a coalition of over 200 national organizations. And I was given 2 minutes. And within that framework, I wanted to make 2 things clear. In the election that year, one candidate was promoting the idea that we needed to make America great again. And the other candidate said, no, we're great already. I thought they were both wrong, because America has never been great for everyone here, never great for most persons of color, women, immigrants, or workers. So there was neither some golden era in the American experience to return to, nor should we accept the nation as it was in 2016. And the other point I made was that a person's moral compass did not necessarily have to come from religion, that you could be a humanist or an atheist with a set of principles every bit as powerful and progressive as those to be found in some spiritual realm. And I looked out into that grand ballroom that night filled with people who represented every kind of American, every kind of person you could find in this country, and to see advocates for so many of the causes that I believe in and that I suspect most of you do as well. And I was also reminded that night, although there were a few politicians there, that politicians are not likely to be true leaders, that most of the great changes in this country, and indeed changes around the globe, are generated by activists who insist that their government's politicians do the right thing. We don't have laws against child labor because some politician had some inspiration all of a sudden to fight against children laboring in the mines or in the textile mills. We don't have the 1964 Civil Rights Act because Lyndon Baines Johnson woke up one morning and said, you know, it's about time that African Americans be treated fairly. We don't have reproductive justice because courts unilaterally decided it would be a nice thing to do. We have these policies because people like us agitated and marched and litigated. And frankly, I think as we near Election Day, it's good to remember a bit about how far we have come and who has led us there. Elizabeth Cady Stanton was a prime mover in creating a conference in Seneca Falls, New York in the summer of 1848 to discuss the rights of women. It spawned hundreds of similar conferences around the country and eventually helped gain the passage of the 19th Amendment, giving the right to vote for all women in 1920. The people spoke, and politicians eventually had to listen. Fannie Lou Hamer organized for decades for the right of African American women not to have their votes suppressed by tactics like poll taxes. There were required payments to allow you to cast a ballot, or literacy tests, which stopped you from voting if you were an indigenous person or a person of color who couldn't answer some complicated questions, but which, if you failed as a white person, you were grandfathered in to vote as long as your father, or literally your grandfather, had voted in some prior election. Those were largely eliminated by actions of the Supreme Court in 1966 and 1970. Again, the people spoke, and politicians had to listen. My friend Bill Baird is now 88 years old. He was the man arrested in Massachusetts in 1967 for passing out condoms after a lecture at Boston University about birth control, which at that time was illegal to obtain unless you were part of a married couple. His arrest led to a landmark decision at the United States Supreme Court 5 years later. And that decision made it legal for anyone to obtain these contraceptives. It also extended the idea of constitutionally based privacy, making certain intimate decisions beyond the scope of government interference, and leading, of course, years later to the decision in Roe versus Wade. Evan Wolfson is also a friend of mine. He was the LGBTQIA leader who wanted marriage equality to be a lead issue of gay rights, even though there were members of that community who thought maybe it should be backburnered because it was so controversial. Well, Wolfson disagreed, and he and the lawyers he worked with eventually built on Bill Baird's case to guarantee the right to marry for gay couples in that 2015 decision of Bergefell versus Hodges. Again, in all these cases, people spoke, they agitated, they litigated, and eventually politicians did recognize that. So these are some of the streams of progress of the past few decades, all ultimately, as it turned out, resolved by the United States Supreme Court. As Abhi mentioned, Election Day has essentially already come and gone for nearly 96 million people. That's close to 70% of all the people who voted in 2016. These, of course, are the people who have voted early in person or have had their mail-in ballots sent and certified as received. By Election Day, most observers anticipate that this may be the highest voter turnout since the 1870s. So what should we do if various outcomes occur? What happens if our favorite politicians prevail and all of a sudden we can get a good night's sleep? Well, I'd submit we should all be happy for a couple of days and then get on with the work of having those favored candidates move even more in the direction of support for justice and democracy. We need to move them more to a true north on the moral compass of the universe. In 2016, millions of us marched in virtually every state and territory because we were concerned about the policies of the newly elected president. Now, we aren't likely to march in this COVID winter nightmare that we're probably going to have, but there are other things we can do. We need to make clear that we have work to do, even if our favorite politicians become elected. We need absolutely to resist the idea that we have fixed enough. We have not elected wizards who have some magical power to help those who are sick or dispossessed or impoverished. We have just elected politicians we hope are better than the ones that preceded them. What if our favorite candidates lose? Well, we could just fall into despair, vow that we'll never support a candidate again, we'll never donate another dollar, we'll never write another letter, never knock on another door for anyone running for public office. Or maybe we could decide to find an open tavern, socially distance, and then hope that our constant moaning will convince the bartenders there to name a drink after us. Or how about checking out how it is to move to places like Canada or New Zealand? Believe me, every one of those scenarios has crossed my mind, but all three of them, and dozens more that people may have, should ultimately be unthinkable, because those approaches really represent a step toward national suicide, a sense that America is hopeless and will be forever. A friend of mine sent me an Egyptian blessing the other day, and it reads, "May the gods stand between you and harm in all the empty spaces where you must walk." Wednesday could feel empty, and then we need to figure out how, with or without the help of some kind of divine power, what we can do to create a vision for the country. Proverbs 29 verse 18 reads, "Where there is no vision, the people perish." If we choose to reject maintaining that vision of democracy, that vision of justice, then our democracy truly perishes. Now, many of us have felt more than a little stressed over the past months. I certainly have, and more so over the past few weeks. Well, what if there is no resolution of this election? Not on election night, not in the days immediately following it. What if this starts to feel all over again like Al Gore versus George Bush? What if political parties and candidates end up in lawsuits against each other, each one claiming that the election process was fundamentally unfair to them? Although I don't believe that's what will happen, there are plenty of warning signs about what could happen. Let me just spell out a couple of them. Some ideas, like the argument made by some on the radical right that all mail-in balloting is inherently unconstitutional, are not going to go anywhere. However, there are some open questions floating around which could disenfranchise people in specific states. One challenge is the decision in South Carolina to eliminate much of the practice of signature matching, where the signatures on a ballot are compared to a signature on file when you first registered to vote to see if they look different, a kind of reminder of hanging chads in Florida some years ago. Another challenge which went up to the United States Supreme Court just last week ended up in a 4-4 tie because recently elevated Justice Amy Coney Barrett said she didn't have enough time to read the record. It involves a decision by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court to count all ballots that are postmarked by Election Day, but received up to 3 days later. That could return to the Supreme Court it's not fully resolved. Also pending is a case about whether ballots should be separated. Those that were received by election day, those that were received up to a week later. To oversimplify a bit, but these cases are all about whether state courts can interpret state statutes to alter election rules in time of a medical crisis or other factors. And I do worry that some of these arcane questions could reach the now 6-3 conservatively swinging court and end up changing some state election results and disenfranchising hundreds or thousands of voters. And if that does happen in any states, then we need to take a hard look at issues that seemed unthinkable just years ago. Maybe we should expand the size of the United States Supreme Court. Court balancing, court expansion, or as some on the right call it, court packing. Maybe we should just add judges to those appeals courts around the country that end up being the final arbiter of 98% of the cases filed in this country. Maybe we should add those judges to appeals courts because there's been a 40% increase in the number of cases appealed to these courts, and not a single new federal court appeals position has opened in the last 30 years. So these are the kind of structural changes that might well be necessary to preserve fundamental principles of fairness and a swift adjudication of claims of Americans on all these issues. But that's really for the future. I think we should be disturbed enough to see some of the tactics employed by officials that have the appearance, at least to me, of very clear voter intimidation. A Michigan judge allowing armed people to stand around polling places. The Texas governor insisting that there can only be one ballot drop box per county, even though there's at least one county in the state of Texas that is larger than the state of Rhode Island. Voting may not be literally a sacred right, but it is an incredibly important one, because without it, no other claimed right is safe. When I think about these intimidation tactics, though, I think more of a woman named Ruth Rossman, who became somewhat of an internet sensation over the last few days when her story appeared in a local newspaper in New York. Ruth was born in March of 1916, which makes her 104 and a half years old. She was born before women had the right to vote. She lost her father in the flu epidemic of 1918. She voted for the first time for Franklin Delano Roosevelt and went out this year with a friend in her walker to cast her ballot in Manhattan. She was taken to the front of the line by election officials, all of whom in the videos of the event were in tears. She did an interview with the local television station in which she said, "I voted in this election, and now I can die happy." So the people who say, well, voting really doesn't matter, I'd suggest they listen to Ruth's stories and then immediately get to a polling place. Thank you.
Love will guide us. Love will guide us. Peace has tried us. Hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hot night. If you can but speak before thousands, you can give from deep within yourself. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard nights. Love will guide us through the hard nights.
Thank you, Reverend Barry Lynn, for your challenging and inspiring message. I also thank my colleagues, Reverend Katie Romano Griffin and Dana Edwards, our worship associate, Babs Ricketts, our musicians, Dr. Jasmine Lee, Jenny Lynn Moyer, Rachel Moore, Chris Morrow, Cedar Lane Virtual Choir, our guest musicians, Jesse Paladovsky, Amanda Thomas, Jen Heyman, and the We Thrive Virtual Choir for the beautiful and inspiring music that enriched and enlivened today's service. Thank you to our amazing AV team and visual arts team, Barb Thompson, Michael McCrickard, Todd Chernikoff, Mike Morse, Rebecca Nachtrieb, Don Woodruff, and Claire Jaycox for the Remembrance ritual slides. And a special thanks to our membership staff and pastoral volunteers who have been active in the live chat. Friends, fans, and members of Cedar Lane, please join us with your favorite beverage for a virtual coffee hour following the service. The Zoom link will be in the YouTube chat and on your screen after the postlude. And join us next Sunday at 11 a.m. with the Reverend Katie Romano Griffin and Dana Edwards to honor Veterans Day and to heal the heart of democracy. Our benediction is from the Reverend Mark Bellatini. I hear the polls are going to be open on Tuesday, all day. Good. I certainly intend to go to them. I certainly invite you to go to them and vote too. But today, I say the polls are not just open on Tuesday. I say they are open every day, every hour, even here, even now. I'm going to vote right now for the right to dream of a world where the word politics doesn't stop me in my tracks and where the word honor still has a few good meanings left. I'm going to vote right now for the power of free people to actually be free. No matter who they are, no matter who has abandoned them, no matter who hates them, I actually am going to vote for love. I'm going to vote for truthfulness as the norm, not the exception. I'm going to vote for a world that doesn't vote for killing, control, and swagger. I'm going to vote for you. I'm going to vote for me right now, right here, silently, but for real. May it be so.